Hi, welcome to a new video, and in this one we're taking a look at RaceRoom, which has just seen a very sizable update land. It's got a whole load of patch notes and stuff attached to it, which I'll link to down below. The main thing with this is, and they signposted this a few months ago, this is the update that effectively has rewritten the force feedback model completely, and I do mean completely. They've taken the old force feedback model and scrapped it and brought along a completely new one. Now, I must confess, I personally didn't think the force feedback model that has just gone was that bad within RaceRoom. It wasn't brilliant, and a lot of it was based on canned effects, but it did it pretty well and it communicated to you pretty well. Its biggest sin, in all honesty, was to a degree an overemphasis of understeer, lack of communication of what the rear of the car was doing, and generally cars felt a bit generic in terms of forced feedback. Now, the devs have put together a guide of kind of what the old force feedback was missing and what the new force feedback has effectively gained. So I'm just going to quickly run through that because it is interesting, just, well, to me anyway, to see what we've lost and what we've now gained. So the old force feedback, steering geometry of the cars was ignored, resulting in little difference in force feedback between cars. Results in steering torques being wrong as they depend only on tyre forces rather than the actual characteristics of the car. 2. Lack of longitudinal tyre forces. 3. Lack of gyroscopic forces from the tyres. 4. The tyre forces from physics are badly translated into force feedback torque. 5. Tyre contact patch movement is ignored and no dynamic change whilst driving. And 6. Too many sliders in the force feedback options menu, some of them making promises the force feedback could not deliver. Now, in all honesty, there's a lot in there that I don't argue with, and I've already mentioned it's things that I personally thought were challenges within the old force feedback model. So what have we got now? What's come along and that's new? Well, first point, steering geometry is now used, so there's quite a bit of difference between cars, and the resulting steering torques have real meaning. And yes, that's quite evident. You drive a range of the new cars and it really is evident that you've got a lot more difference between the cars in terms of the force feedback you're getting. All tyre forces are taken into account, gyroscopic effects of the tyres are taken into account, 100% physics-based calculations, tyre contact patch movement is used, much more dynamic feel while driving, and only crucial settings to adjust the force feedback to the various steering wheels. And again, yes, most of what's mentioned in here I certainly do agree with, and I'll come on and talk a little bit more about that as we go through. One of the things I did find when I fired it up for the first time is that they have said over on the official forums, again I'll link to the info on that down below, that it's plug and play. It will remember your old wheel and bingo, everything will be hunky-dory and off you can go. Well, I personally didn't find that, I have to say. When I first dropped in, it was devoid of feel. It was utterly appalling, and I had to delete my existing wheel profile and set one up from scratch. Didn't take long to do, in all honesty, but it was something I needed to do to get the force feedback working properly. Once I'd done that and reset everything up, absolutely fine. Everything was exactly as it should be, which is good. One of the things they do also recommend, and I would strongly back this up, is mapping some buttons to force feedback gain plus a negative on your wheel, and also mapping, or at least when you start playing around with it, having the force feedback clip meter on screen. So there's a new little widget that allows you to see that. I popped it on a button box spare button I had, so I can just pop that on and off within RaceRoom, and it does allow you to fine tune the force feedback on a car by car basis, which is quite nice. I must confess I found I don't really have to play around with a great deal on it. It's what I've found so far is extremely good and extremely positive, in all honesty. So we're getting a lot more difference between cars in it. We are starting to see characteristics that we would expect to see in the cars. So the first initial thing is the actual loading up of the wheel, so in terms of physical resistance, so your actual steering force resistance load from the pneumatic trail on the tyre and self-aligning torque are really, really well done. They build up in a very realistic manner. In comparison to some of the similar types of car I've driven in reality, the actual loading that you get as you start applying force, as downforce applies to a vehicle, are really well communicated, and it does build up extremely well, and from my personal experience, extremely accurately as well, which is nice to see. It gives you a lot of confidence when you're going into longer corners, which is something that a lot of titles do miss. So you find committing to longer corners, particularly big sweepers, quite difficult because you kind of never quite sure how much load to apply. And being perfectly honest, with a good force feedback in this regard, you should find that you're not trying to apply load, you're trying to resist force being applied back to you, and it's that balance that you get that gives you the confidence and the ability to hold a car through a long sweeping corner, and that's really well done now in RaceRoom. I'm really quite pleased with how that's come across. The understeer effect is much more subtle and much more varied between vehicles. It's no longer just this great big cliff that happens. Well, certainly not in all cars. In some cars, the loss of self-aligning torque and that massive reduction in steering weight or resistance is quite pronounced, because in some cars it is quite pronounced, in others it's a lot less pronounced. It's also important to realise, and a lot of people mix this one up, that you're not just losing grip at that point. Most of the fine balance, that last margin of grip, the last tenth or so, is actually as that load starts reducing, and that's all again to do with how self-aligning torque and slip angles align themselves. So again, really well done. The lack of canned effects I really like. There are 3 that you can still turn on, and again there's a guide to these both within RaceRoom itself, which is nice to see, but also on the website forum link that I'll post down below, that you can go and have a look. So you can dial back in some of the canned effects if you want. I found I don't need to, but I am fortunate enough to be running a tactile setup on my rig, so a lot of stuff that people will find missing in terms of communication that comes from canned effects, they may want to pick back up in there, particularly around curbs. But I actually find the way curbs have been done to be reasonably well brought across. But I have to say that's probably the area I'm least impressed with. Whilst what we do now have with the removal of the canned effect, you no longer have an effect that's kind of like I'm driving, or you're driving over a curb, therefore shake the wheel. It's now based on what's actually going on with the wheel. So if you're going across a big sawtooth curb or something like that, you're feeling more. If you're going across just a painted curb, you get a very slight movement just from the curb itself, nothing from the surface. But it's a bit muted for my taste, in all honesty, in comparison to reality, particularly with very firmly sprung cars and heavily damped cars. You should be feeling a bit more than we are at the present moment, and I hope to see that tweaked in the future, because it definitely needs to be. One of the things I'm also really impressed with, and Chris Hay pointed this out in the video that he put out earlier today, is that with the vehicles that are more softly sprung and damped, and that's a relative term because anything that is track dedicated, a race car, is in comparison to a road car very firmly sprung and damped, but we're talking the sliding scale of racing vehicles here. Some of the older 90s DTM stuff and things like that, where they are, in comparison to a modern car, more softly sprung, you're getting more communication of what's going on in terms of body roll and overall movement of the vehicle. But you're getting a good feel of weight transfer regardless of what car you're driving, which is really nice to see. So overall, I mean, there's a lot gone into this update. It does effectively reboot RaceRoom, and that's quite interesting because that's the second title in less than a month that's had such a significant change to its physics engine, or in this case force feedback engine, that it is, to all intents and purposes, rebooting the title and launching it afresh. So we've had that with Automobilista 2, which has taken on a new lease of life with its last major update, and now we've had RaceRoom doing exactly the same thing. And it's good to see, because these are two titles that I personally really like, and I think are often ignored by the sim racing community at the expense of the more shiny toys that grab everybody's attention. I think both of them deserve a lot more love than they get. One of the nice things with RaceRoom is it is very much a complete package as well. The only thing that's really absent from it is weather. But aside from that, you've got a good range of unique and unusual tracks that you don't often get in other titles. You've got a great vehicle roster in here, you really do have. Absolutely astounding AI. If you are the sort of person that is not into racing online and wants to race single player against AI, the AI in RaceRoom is absolutely top notch. The audio is top notch, and over the last year or so the physics have come on massively as well. So it really is a well-rounded package, and it's now got the makings and the beginnings of a really good online scene as well, with dedicated rooms, regular events going on, etc. So if you've not given RaceRoom a go for a while, I strongly recommend giving it a try now. It is free to play, so you can pick up the basic package with a small number of tracks and cars and give it a go. One of the other things that this update's also brought with it is the ability to try any of the cars, to test drive any of the cars on any of the tracks you own, which is nice as well. So you can give them a go and see what you do and don't want to buy on there. But I'm really enjoying this, and it's a great update to a solid title in my opinion. So yeah, hopefully you found this video useful, and let me know what your thoughts are on RaceRoom and this update in particular down below in the comments section. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more content of this type, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new content gets uploaded. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.